It's not in the face! Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Hey, Not the Face with your host, John Nash, and your producer, me, Steffi Haynes. And today we have one of our infamous hodge-podge episodes where basically I threw a bunch of questions into a hat and pulled out the 9 best ones. Why not 10? Well, because there were only 9 in there. So anyways, we're about to get started. First, let's check in with John and see how he's doing this week.
Terrible.
Why are you terrible?
No, my lungs are shot. Just very congested. I got some lung issues. I don't want to get too into it, but they're really congested lately. So I've been coughing a lot, hard to breathe, gasping for air on just simple going up flights of stairs. So terrible. So just, and me being the center of the universe that I am, it's just terrible for the world that I'm suffering like this.
I know what it is. John just didn't want to come back to California, back to the United States from Paris, and so his lungs are in revolt.
I can believe that. I can definitely believe that. But I don't think that's the case, but I can believe that.
I'm going to say that that's the case because it sounds a lot better.
Yes, definitely.
All right. You ready to get started, though? Because
hell no, but let's do it.
We got some stuff to crack on with here. And my first question is the antitrust case. It's been settled now, but some new or newer information has come out about fighter pay that we weren't really privy to before. So why don't you let us in on what you found out?
Well, it's kind of interesting. I shouldn't say it. For me, it's interesting. Other people might think it's the lamest thing in the world, but they had a summary of in the settlement, one of the documents in the settlement, they do a summary of how much fighters were paid, earned during each class period during a date period. So for the Lee class, I think it's $549 million or something like that. But give me a second, I'll give you an exact number. It is for the Lee class. It's $556.5 million for the Lee class during their class period, which is for December 16, 2010 to June 30th, 2017. Now, for the Johnson class, they give us the total event compensation for that class they have a misprint. They say July 1st, 2016. I'm pretty sure, based on double checking a bunch of other numbers, they mean July 1st, 2017 through where they got it goes longer than this, but the data they have goes up through April 13, 2023. So during that period, Johnson class, the fighters in the Johnson class, their total event compensation, the stuff they get paid for the fights, was $1,022.2 million. So what I find interesting about that is that we can actually get a percentile, how much the fighters earned as a percentage of the total revenue, not the event revenue, because we don't have a breakdown of that, but the total revenue during that period, because we have things like the class action disclosure, because they revealed the revenue for every year, right? We also have the SEC filings. We have the revenue for every year now. I mean, basically we have every year's revenue from 2001 to now for the UFC. So using that, we can determine how much of a share of the revenue the fighters earned during those periods. So for the Lee class, where they earned $556.5 million from 2010 to midway through 2017, that comes out to just a hair under 16% of the total revenue was paid to the fighters as event compensation. Now, this is where it gets interesting. We had those numbers before, but for the Johnson class, we didn't have this percentage before. We did estimates. I did some myself. I calculated, but if they earned $1,022 million, well, during the Johnson period, there was the UFC should have earned about $5.4 billion in revenue. That means the fighters earned just a smidge under 19% of the total revenue. Basically a 3% increase over the previous class period.
Wow. So now, may I ask?
Ask away.
Would you say that came about because of the antitrust case?
It's possible. I mean, in the filing, they do bring up that the change in contracts likely led in a result in that there being more competition, the fighters having more options, because that was the purpose of the change in contracts, is to make a split so that the plaintiffs couldn't make the same allegation for the Johnson class. So I got really nerdy over the last few days, and I took all the disclosed payouts for all the years from basically 2015 to 2020 when they stopped disclosing payouts. Now, this is not the sum total of all the fighter payouts, right? This is just places like Atlanta and Las Vegas and California where they report their pay, but it's basically about a quarter of all the events got disclosed during that time, maybe a little bit less. So, but I could kind of compare it. And I noticed that in 2016, the mean average that year for disclosed pay was 96,000 and the median was 35, right? That mean average, they don't do better than that for any year going forward, except for 2019, where there was such a small pool. I probably would throw out that year. There's just too few of disclosed payouts. But even in 2020, the mean average was $96,600 was the mean average. In other words, the average of all the reported payouts. And then if I separate it in quartiles, in other words, by quarters of the payout, you see that the first quarter covers from $10,000 to $20,000 in disclosed pay in 2016, and then by 2021 it covers $10,000 to $24,000. So there's a shift, and the averages for the top quartile doesn't change much. So okay, so all that nerdy stuff aside, what's this tell us? What's this tell us as I follow the reported payouts, as I use that as kind of as a surrogate for what the payouts of the fighters are? Well, it shows that payouts went up basically almost every year or so. By 2020, fighters were making more, but not so much more that would explain why we had a 3% increase in the wage share, right? It basically kept pace with the increase of revenue. So it should have kept them around the same percentile of pay that they were getting before. So that makes me assume that it's the top guys, the people that pay is not reported, because that's where pay is not reported. Usually the top guys, either pay-per-view bonuses or undisclosed payouts, side letters, that is really pushing the wages up. So in other words, the UFC, it's not like they just started paying a lot more because they got nice. It's because specific fighters at the top seem to be getting more. The other possibility too is in 2020, they retained a lot of fighters because of the pandemic. And when you're on contracts and you don't fire guys and bring in new guys, the pay doesn't, the pay keeps going up. So that's a slight possibility, but I think the majority of it is the top guys are getting more. That means like the Khabibs, the Conor McGregors, obviously, Israel Adesanya, and you hear the rumored payouts that some of these fighter guys are making, and they're much higher than what Anderson Silva and George St. Pierre were getting back in the Lee period. More along the lines of what Brock got for his one fight. So that suggests that the top guys, and not just the very top guys, maybe the next tier down, earned more than they would have based just on the increase in revenue, and that's why the percentage went up. But that would fit if you're the plaintiffs. You would argue that because you changed the contracts and because there's other factors beyond that. I mean, Conor McGregor supposedly threatened the UFC with the Ali Act, and that's why he got his, the Mayweather fight, then used that leverage to negotiate a better deal. There's also other promotions springing up and willing to spend money like Bellator and PFL and ONE, but that would impact the fighters that left. They got the better deals from Bellator. We're talking about fighters in the UFC. So the plaintiffs' attorneys would probably, and their experts would probably say, this is exactly what should have happened if you loosen their contract. So it is possible. It is very plausible, in fact, that because of the changes from 2017 to 2020, we saw the wage share increase. And if that's the case, not only did the settlement, the $315 million is in part because of the antitrust case, that means 3% of the revenue during the Johnson period, another $150 million or so, could be attributed to the antitrust case.
One last question on this.
Go ahead.
This particular topic. Since we've sort of speculated that it was because of the antitrust suit that we saw that 3% rise, even if it is only at the top. If that 3% is only for the 1%.
Well, I would say it's probably more than the 1%. We're talking the top 10%.
I know. I was just trying to make a joke about the 1%.
I'm sorry. I stepped on your joke. I can't believe I ruined it like that. I was not ready.
But because of that, because we think that that may be the reason, do we also think that now that this antitrust mess is out of the way, that things are going to go back to the old ways and we're going to see a significant drop?
That's also very possible. I mean, I don't know if it's 100. I would argue it's not 100% because the antitrust case. I think it plays a part because you look at guys like Francis Ngannou. We know what Francis Ngannou was offered, right, before he left the UFC. And you look, the closer he got to that period where he had a clean break and could leave the UFC, his offer from the UFC skyrocketed. We're talking from like $4 million after Stipe Miocic, which is just huge compared to a few years ago, to $5-6 million, and then finally $8 million to fight John Jones plus pay-per-view points at the end. So his offer kept going up the closer he got. We know that Paulo Costa supposedly got a great offer, and other people that were in kind of a position where they could test the market got much bigger offers than they would before. So you would assume that in large part, probably not large, but the antitrust case, you'd have to argue, probably played a part in that because these fighters would have a chance to try a market. The other big part, though, is that Bellator, remember, for a period, and we would talk to managers, we talked about on the show, that there was more money in Bellator for everybody but the top UFC fighters. So there was Bellator throwing money, and then PFL and ONE for a short time there, ONE especially, were going after fighters. I don't think it turned out great for some of the ONE guys because people like Vitor that went there, Belfort that went there, he left, and does not seem like, I think he was happy with the end result. So, but there was these other offers out there. So all of them working together, but the contract played a big part. Now, I should also know too, remember, I made an estimate that fighter pay had gone way down, right? And that was based on something they had said in an earnings call because we knew what their fighter pay was in 2005. And then if we took their CAGR, compound annual growth, and we applied it, we got a number, and that number was very low. Well, I shouldn't say it wasn't very. The first year it was over 175 million, maybe 180 million in that ballpark, which would be above the average I just said. But then the next year went down 32 million. And so that made it seem like there is very, very low fighter pay. But I might be accurate there because that might just be a fluke year where they paid very low. And the year before and the year after, where they're both, fairly high. I think if you divide the total amount fighters made over those 6 years, that's 170 million a year. The other years we estimate are both above 170 million. So the year that I had the percentile and that everybody kind of went nuts, like, oh, the UFC's pay is very low, might be just a fluke year that was very, very low. And the other years were higher than that. So.
Well, time to move on to the next question, unless you have anything you want to wrap up that first one with.
No, I can't think of anything besides I'm hoping more information's disclosed. I'm hoping because, it was just a tidbit in the settlement, but I'm hoping there's some way we could figure out for sure who got paid what. Because, right now we don't. I mean, I'm pretty confident based on the calculations I did. The very top guys are what are driving that increase much more than the median and lower. But it would be nice to have more concrete numbers.
How long do you think it'll be before California shuts down the doors to seeing what the fighter purses are?
I thought they would have done it by now. Tell you
Me
the truth.
too.
I'm kind of shocked that they haven't.
Yeah, me too. All right, let's get to the second question. What is going on with Mark Hunt's case?
Well, I don't know for sure. We do know that he disclosed some filings. Now, I haven't had a chance because it just happened the other day to look up on the on Pacer if those filings exist on Pacer. I hope they do, because as much as I love disclosed information, I don't like the idea that Mark Hunt is disclosing stuff that the judge hasn't approved for public disclosure, right? So that's one. I hope that this was stuff that comes just from the filing and he's sharing it there. I hate that it's because that could really blow back in Mark Hunt. I mean, let's pretend it's, let's just assume that it's public disclosure information. It's interesting. I guess I have to see the full filings to confirm it, because what he's claiming is that the UFC basically has lied about their position on a lot of his case, and that they've made claims that obviously maybe not obviously, but are somewhat provable false, because they were doing something else behind the scene. Namely, that they claim that they could not test Brock Lesnar because they hadn't had a contract yet. Without a contract, they couldn't do it. But then he's claiming that they had made this agreement with Vince McMahon and the WWE months earlier, and that they were just toying, basically misleading everybody that they had to wait for this agreement when the agreement was verbally in place. So I would like to get more disclosed, like texts and emails and stuff that he might have that would show that. But I mean, that would be, if it's true, that's pretty interesting stuff. I personally don't know how it impacts his case per se, because the judge's ruling, which I didn't fully agree with the way he ruled, I don't know if this would overturn it, because the basic claim was that fighters have no expectation to fight someone clean, right? So it's kind of hard to overturn that, because there's no expectation ever. But if this ends up being confirmed, that we have evidence that these emails, these comments by the UFC are 100% correct, I mean, this is something that should be looked at, because it seems like a gross violation of the spirit of sport that you are not enforcing, or I guess enforcing them based on a whim and personal favoritism on how the rules are enforced. So, of course, the people that would enforce it, like the ABC, they're not going to do it. So who would step in and look into that? But I find that intriguing. But the problem right now is, like I said, I'm going to have to go scour through the Pacer, see if there's more information on this. But right now, it's some snippets from his filings, and so I would like to have more information before really going off on that.
Remind everyone, our listeners, what Pacer is.
Oh, Pacer is a site that for federal court system, they upload documents. That's what you file to, so you can get it. If you're part of if you're an attorney working on a case, you get on for free. If you're someone like me, I got to pay for my access. So but it's not a lot, but I got to pay for every document I download. But anybody can use it. So it's PACER. You get a login account, and you enter a credit card, and you can download any document you want that's up there. Of course, a lot of cases, like the antitrust case, before the judge ruled that everything could be disclosed, a lot of the stuff originally filed was sealed. And so it would just be like black marks all through the document. So it's kind of you get very upset because you download a 120-page document, spent $12 on that one individual document, and you look and it's all black. Like, why did I waste my money on this?
And remind everyone who is representing Mark Hunt right now.
Well, right now, Mark Hunt's representing himself.
Yes,
which is usually a bad idea.
But it seems like he's, someone is advising him, because he's coming up with the right documents.
Yeah. He seems to be doing an admirable job as his own attorney. I still question the idea of posting stuff that has not been unsealed. I just don't think it's a wise decision to piss off a judge.
Yeah. All right. Next question. Last weekend, we had the 5 versus 5 Matchroom versus Queensberry. And of course, Queensberry came away. They swept everything. And Frank Warren said something that captured my attention. He said that Turkey al-Sheikh and Saudi Arabia were running boxing, that they had taken it over. Talk to me about this.
Well, I guess they've taken it over. What's the talk? Everything's now over in Saudi Arabia. No, I don't think they've 100% taken it over. I tell you what they have taken over. British boxing.
What?
They've taken over the British boxing, I would say.
Explain.
Well, I mean, if you look at who's the promoters that work with them the most in the events that seem to be taking place in Saudi Arabia, it's the UK boxing scene. Mm-hmm. It's the Fury, it's Joshua, it's all, it's Eddie Hearn and Queensberry promotions, or it's Matchroom and Queensberry. Their events are taking more in Saudi Arabia. Now Americans seem interested in it because the money's being thrown around, but the big events in Saudi Arabia seem to be mostly centered on the UK events more than more than what we would see in the American ones, because Canelo Alvarez supposed to get offered. I don't know if it's true or not, but he shot it down. Tank Davis isn't over there yet. We're not seeing the big U.S. pay-per-view attractions. Now, some Americans obviously are interested in going. Deontay Wilder was fighting over there, but the big American stars right now are not making the trip over that. And I think if you look at the numbers that came out from the event, right? Mike Coppinger reported some of the numbers that it supposedly did.
Wait, not that event. Hold off on that one for a moment.
Yeah, sorry.
I am interested specifically in them promoting Anthony Joshua's next fight.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, that's this is where I'll say the Saudis seem to be making a move, besides just holding events in Saudi Arabia, which are not making. If you look the pay-per-view sales in the U.S., there's not much attraction here for them. But where the Saudis seem to be much more intent on just having events in Saudi Arabia, is that they're starting to hold events outside of Saudi Arabia. Now, I should remind everybody, and you might remember, we talked about that it would be smart to not hold all your events in Saudi Arabia because you're going to kill your audience.
Right.
Because the audience, the market for the media, the fan base, most of them are not going to go to Saudi Arabia for every event. And lo and behold, they have the Bud Crawford fight coming up in Los Angeles. They have a Anthony Joshua fight coming at Wembley Stadium in the UK. I think he's going to be Dubois as a opponent, so that should be a huge fight. And then they're also talking about an event in Germany, so they are expanding their footprint and putting on the Riyadh season. I think they should come up with a different promotion name. That is just too confusing. Is it the season or is it the promoter? I don't know. But Riyadh season is going to hold events, outside of Saudi Arabia, which is very smart in a sense because you're going to increase interest in your product, and then eventually you can build up bigger products and bring it back to Saudi Arabia if you want to hold it there. So I do find that interesting. I do question how long they're going to be committed to this because they have a ton of money. But if it doesn't catch on, if there's no return down the line, at some point you got to think that, I know they have an unlimited amount of money in some ways, from just money they're willing to throw around. But at some point, if they keep losing hundreds of millions every year, at some point you got to say they're gonna throw in the towel. But based on how much money they have, they could probably do this for years and years and years, and then maybe eventually they start seeing a return and they keep doing it. But even then, it's good. It's going to be good times for. It's not. I don't think it's going to end overnight. It's going to go. This is going to go on for a while with Saudi money.
If they keep holding outside of Saudi, I think they might be able to catch on.
Well, one thing, this is just me, if anybody from Saudi Arabia is listening, free advice again. One thing I think they make a mistake is they have too many fights on their cards.
Yeah. The pacing is ridiculous.
Yeah.
They make it this whole pride event. Pretty much. That's what I liken it to because, an event with, say, 8 fights will last from 11 a.m. until midnight. It is nuts.
Yeah, it goes on forever. Maybe that's what how they like it out there. But I would say it's not MMA, right? And part of MMA, the undercard's built on the fact that degenerate gamblers want to watch every fight. That's a big part of MMA, I think. But for the boxing cards, MMA has a much greater chance for a fight to end quick, right? And the fights themselves are shorter, 3 fights, so 15-minute rounds, where any good fight in boxing has got to be at least an 8-rounder. So you're talking about 50% more time to begin with, 50 or twice as much. So I would say instead of having these 7 or 8 fight deep cards, 3, 4, 5 fights max would be my rule. You maybe have some prospects on a prelim and it's kind of like a showbox card on the prelims. I could see you trying to do something like that. But for the most part, the card should be 5 fights max because it is a chore to watch in a boxing event that's 7, 8 that you're expected to watch 9 bouts.
Yeah, not interested at all. I agree with you 100% on that. Now, in regards to boxing, I have another question for you because Devin Haney and Ryan Garcia's camps are saying that they have not been paid in full. Oscar De La Hoya came out and released a statement and basically said, check your contract. If you had bothered to check your contract, you would see that everything is right there. The money doesn't come in all at once. Blah, blah, blah. I need to know, is Oscar De La Hoya telling the truth or is he spinning us a yarn? The second half of this episode will be available on Thursday. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to subscribe.
Ow! Ow! Not the face! Ooh! Ooh! Okay, the face!